Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Kid Naruto Awakened the Rinnegan Part 1. If you enjoy this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Get out of my store, you scumbag. A loud thud was heard through a street in the bustling Konohagakure no Sato, followed by pained groans and a few choice curses mumbled under breath. The young blonde boy who muttered these annoyances in irritation was, of course, completely ignored by the rest of the world, except for one particularly irate shop owner who stared at the boy with poorly concealed hatred. "What is your big idea, old man? I need to get some shuriken and kunai so I can practice being a ninja." As the burly shopkeeper turned away, the only response the whiskered child received was a huff of contempt. As if a brat like you could ever become a ninja. He was about to slam the door to his shop shut to emphasize that point. But he changed his mind, quickly turning to stare heatedly at the blue-eyed visage that had unwittingly become the unwitting center of so much hatred in the village. "And don't let me catch you in my store again, or you'll pay dearly." With that, he slammed the door shut, the small door sign flipping to open by the breeze in an ironic twist. "Yeah, just look." The young blonde turned to face the rest of the people on the street, who went about their business as if nothing had happened. "You'll all notice. One day, I'll be Hokage." With that, the whiskered child dashed down the street at an unusually fast pace for such a small and obviously malnourished boy. Residents of the busy shopping district turned to watch him leave, some of the older women whispering in hushed tones. "Did you see him today, dishonorable? I'm not sure what Hokage-sama is thinking by admitting someone like that to the Shinobi Academy. I know, my Ami-chan is the same year as him, I just know he'll try to corrupt her. Well, I'm sure I'm warning my son to stay away from him. That little demon won't destroy the next generation as well." Of course, all of these conspiratorial whispers were lost on the running child, who was too preoccupied with staving off tears at the edge of his vision. "Hey Gigi, I need your assistance." Glittering blue eyes blinked in surprise at the empty office, framed by the expansive window's panoramic backdrop of Konoha. "Gigi." The young blonde looked around, perplexed. He rarely found his grandfather figure in his office, often poring over various sheets of paper that perplexed the whiskered youth when he tried to read them over the man's shoulder. "He's not here, so I guess he's out doing badass ninja stuff. After all, he's the Hokage." The boy quickly went to work after that simple piece of 7-year-old logic cleared up his confusion. He immediately went around the back of the large, ornate oak desk, which was piled high with various mission reports and budgeting requests, none of which the blonde was interested in. Instead, he started ribbing through the desk drawers, completely disregarding the painstakingly organized filing system. Finally, the whiskered blonde threw up his hands in defeat before running them through his messy golden locks, whining angrily. "How come Gigi doesn't have any shuriken or kunai?" As he looked over at the large picture of the fourth Hokage on the wall, a mischievous grin that many ANBU had come to take warning of split his lightly tanned face. "Gigi thinks I'm unaware of his super secret hiding place." The blonde moved quickly over to the framed photo, pulling it to one side in a smooth motion to reveal a large metal safe, his grin still splitting his whiskered cheeks. The old man should not dismiss Naruto Uzumaki. The small boy pressed his ear to the cold metal, oblivious to the strange arrangement of kanji and symbols that spread out from the point of contact, which glowed a welcoming blue before fading back into the safe. He twisted the dial with deft fingers until the last click echoed through the empty room. Naruto swung the large metal door open with a small cry of triumph, only to frown in displeasure. He'd seen the old Hokage open the safe many times, but he'd never seen what was inside, of course. His childlike mind had immediately thought up many cool and mysterious possibilities, which was why he was disappointed. A dumb scroll. Of course, the scroll was about the same height as Naruto, but that was beside the point for the young blonde. Of all the things for Gigi to keep in such a fantastic safe, he chooses a dumb scroll. With a small sigh, the blonde attempted to pick up the scroll, oblivious to the 3 sets of hands that instinctively tightened over their kunai pouches in the ceiling's darker corners. Naruto managed to lift the massive scroll about an inch before being forced to drop it with a dulled thud. Naruto frowned at the large scroll, squinting his eyes like a fox, before noticing a glint of metal. With another triumphant cry, the blonde reached into the safe and extracted his prize. His delighted expression quickly changed to one of intense confusion. "What is this strange kunai?" In his small hands, he turned it over, noting the unusual 3-pronged shape and kanji written on a slip of paper wrapped around the handle. He tossed it back into the safe with a sigh. It was obviously useless with such an odd design. It was probably some ancient antique his Gigi was keeping as a relic of the past. With a disappointed sigh, he swung the door shut before sliding the picture back into what he thought was the correct position. With his brow furrowed, the blonde took one last sweeping glance around the office before a light bulb appeared over his head. His short legs dragged him back over to the desk, where his hands frantically swept back and forth beneath the polished wooden surface. Finally, a small, almost imperceptible click greeted his tiny ears as a secret compartment protruded from the side of the desk. This one was much smaller than the safe, and its contents further perplexed Naruto. Only a small orange book, a strange glass sphere, a few sheets of paper, and a normal-looking scroll with a spiral design printed on the front appeared to be present. Nothing else. How can Jiji's office be devoid of kunai? Naruto walked out of the room, a silent black form dropping down to the floor behind him, unnoticed. When the Hokage arrived later that afternoon with the delegate from Kumo, he was greeted by a rather amused dog masked Anbu with interesting news. Naruto walked back down the slightly less crowded streets, as people began to retire to their homes as the sun set beyond the horizon. His face was frowning as he considered his predicament. He was supposed to start at the Shinobi Academy tomorrow. It was a year earlier than most, but the Hokage had assured him that he would be fine. The only problem was that no stores would sell him shuriken or kunai. The small blonde was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't notice when a tall man appeared in his path. As a result, Naruto bounced back like he'd just walked into a wall, while the tall dark-haired man sneered mockingly. Naruto looked up, expecting to be chastised for being so careless, but all he saw was the Konoha Police Force logo, and a flash of red eyes before the man walked away, ignoring the blonde as if he had never been there. Naruto rose from the dusty ground, muttering to himself about unobservant people before the metaphorical light bulb clicked over his head once more. He took off on small legs, a grin on his face, in the direction of the Uchiha compound. Those people with the strange red eyes are always carrying kunai pouches. I'm sure no one would notice if I borrowed a few. With that in mind, and a small chuckle to himself, Naruto found himself winding through the streets of Konoha's western districts. After about a half hour, the whiskered child was staring up at the rather imposing stone wall that separated the Uchiha compound from Konoha proper. He never gave the Uchiha much thought, but the fact that they had a wall around their compound struck him as odd. He quickly began to scale the wall, using handholds and cracks that would normally be too small for any other hand to grasp. He eventually flipped himself over and dropped to the ground on the other side of the wall, with a slightly comical wiggling of his legs. He rubbed his chin sheepishly, looking down at the small flower bed he had crushed from his impromptu landing, but quickly pushed it from his mind. The sun had fully set beyond the horizon, and the darkness provided Naruto with excellent cover as he made his way through the back garden of whoever's house he had landed in. Strangely, none of the lights in the house were turned on. It wasn't that late at night, and Naruto would normally be preparing a cup of ramen for dinner right about now. To satisfy his curiosity, he peered in through a low window, but the house appeared deserted. Instead of trying to figure out why the blonde just grinned, this would make it that much easier to grab some kunai or shuriken. He tried to open the window, but it wouldn't budge an inch. With a small groan of annoyance, Naruto gave up and dashed back through the garden, out onto an empty street. The blonde was surprised that no one was out. He had never seen a street in Konoha so quiet before midnight. Naruto scampered across the street, ducking into another alley between two houses, feeling slightly less confident but remaining strong. He paused for a moment to reflect, remembering that all the clan compounds in Konoha were somewhat self-sufficient, which meant there had to be stores to buy things, including ninja supplies. He nearly squealed with delight as he spotted exactly what he was looking for, ducking his head back out into the moonlit street. The store was across the street from him, with a large sign out front that Naruto couldn't quite make out, but the various weapons in the window, as well as the large fan symbol emblazoned across the door, were clearly visible. He dashed across to the door with all the speed his small body could muster, giving it an experimental push only to find it locked. He frowned and looked around, noting the small flap at the bottom of the door, clearly made for whatever animal the shopkeeper kept. He was about to turn around to a side alley to find another way in when he heard approaching footsteps echo through the quiet streets. His eyes widened with surprise and fear of being discovered. Naruto ducked down immediately, pushing himself through the small animal flap that was clearly never intended for human use. He quickly became trapped, his hips just a little too large to pass through. However, as the footsteps approached, he found a new burst of energy, scrabbling with all his might and eventually pushing his lithe body into the store. He sat there, leaning against the door, panting to calm himself. He was starting to regret coming here. People in Konoha generally left him alone, but sometimes they were a little less forgiving. He noticed that people with red eyes tended to be among that group. Look around some more, I thought I heard something. Naruto's heart almost stopped beating as he heard the clearly male voice call out from the street. I don't see anything, and I'm sure you were just hearing things. I swear, you've been jittery lately, you need to calm down. Naruto broke out in a cold sweat as another voice joined the first, sounding much closer than his companion. Shut up. You know Fugaku orders. Sama's the streets must be cleared while the meetings are taking place. We don't want anyone finding out what's going on. If there's a Hokage spy out here, we have to find them and deal with them. Even in his terror, Naruto was perplexed by the conversation that was now painfully close to him. Why should the Hokage be spying on his own shinobi? That made no sense at all. To satisfy his burning curiosity, he slowly raised his head and looked out the window, only to duck back down when he caught sight of burning red eyes. Wait, what was that? The voice sounded suspicious, and footsteps approached the shop where he was hiding. What? The voice sounded a little bored, as if he was just ready to go home and relax instead of trudging around outside looking for threats he knew weren't there. I'm sure there was something in the shop. Naruto gulped, hoping it wasn't too loud, even though it was deafening in his own ears. He dashed deeper into the shop, hoping to conceal himself in the shadows. He instinctively clutched the hilt of a kunai from one of the counters to his chest on the way, as if it would protect him from anything. He pressed himself against the wall beneath the counter as he heard the doorknob rattle a few times before hearing the sound of a key clicking in a lock. Footsteps followed, each slap of a sandal against the wooden floor sounding like a cannon firing right next to the terrified blonde. The next minute was agonizing for Naruto as the Uchiha walked around the small shop, sighing to himself and walking towards the door. The blonde let out a small breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding as his hand touched the doorknob to close it. Unfortunately, it wasn't small enough, and before the air had completely left his lungs, a hand wrapped around his collar, yanking him to his feet, level with a pair of angry Rinnegan. So, what have we here? Do you think he's too young to be a spy? He sneered across at his companion, but Naruto took advantage of his distraction and lashed out instinctively with the kunai clutched to his chest. The man dropped Naruto with a cry of pain and rage, clutching his arm, which was now spraying blood in a long arc. Naruto dashed out of the store, slipping between the legs of the man's surprised companion in one smooth motion before vaulting to his feet and sprinting away. The two Uchiha were taken aback for a moment, but they quickly took off after the tiny child, using their shinobi training to strengthen the muscles in their legs and take off at incredible speed. The two shinobi were right behind Naruto as he dropped back down on the other side of the wall. Using speed and energy he hadn't realized he had, the blonde took off again, staying just ahead of his pursuers. He did everything he could to avoid the two Uchiha, including sliding through holes in fences that were too large for them to pass through, using his knowledge of the alleyways to confuse them, and even grabbing a peacefully sleeping cat and throwing it at the men. Tora, as the name on its collar suggested, didn't appreciate the early start and managed to keep the two would-be capturers busy for an unexpectedly long time. Long enough for the terrified blonde to arrive at his destination. It wasn't uncommon for Naruto to be pursued due to his recent history as a prankster. In those cases, however, he would have planned his escape, usually with a few surprises for his pursuers, giving him plenty of time to make it to the Hokage Tower or his home, where he knew he was safe. He had no plan, no tricks to conjure up, and there was only one place nearby where he could feel safe. He burst through the flaps in front of Ikaraku's ramen, surprising the young teenage girl behind the counter who was washing dishes. She hadn't even had time to scream in surprise when the whiskered blonde jumped the small counter, using the seats as a springboard. The brown-haired girl only had time to look down at his quivering form in shock before two men appeared in front of her, almost making her drop the bowl she was cleaning in fright. She quickly regained her composure and put on a well-worn smile. "Hello, my name is Im, and how may I assist you?" One of the men, his Rinnegan active and spinning wildly, inspected the small shop before snorting contemptuously. He turned on his heel and marched out, his scowl growing even more pronounced. The man behind him apologized to Im before hurrying out after his companion. Im turned to the still shaking Naruto, a small frown settling on her normally upbeat and smiling face. "What have you done now, Naruto?" She sighed again as the blonde boy smiled sheepishly, if slightly strainedly, as he rubbed the back of his neck, whether out of habit or nerves she couldn't tell. She finally allowed a soft smile to cross her lips as she extended her hand to him, which he gratefully accepted, clinging to her arm like a lifeline. She led him around the back of the shop, like a stray dog, to the couch in the small living room back there. "Just stay there, Naruto, I'll go make us some tea, okay?" Just stay there, Naruto, I'll go make us some tea, okay. As Ayame quickly returned to the kitchen area, Naruto gave a small quivering nod, earning him a glowing smile. Thank you, Ayame-chan. The girl turned around at the door, clutching the frame and smiling serenely at the little boy she considered a little brother in all but blood. What do big sisters do for me? Naruto finally seemed to relax, sinking deeper into the couch as Ayame left to make some tea. An older man with graying hair and a fatherly smile that seemed to be permanently set on his wrinkling features chose that moment to walk down the stairs to see what was all the fuss about. What brings you to our humble abode, Naruto? The small blonde turned to face the familiar voice, a small but genuine smile on his whiskered face at the sight of one of his prized possessions. Tuchai Ojisan. The man simply chuckled as he placed a hand on the young boy's shoulder, his calloused palm dwarfing the boy's small frame. Who did you manage to irritate this time, my boy? I'm hoping it wasn't a Hyuga, because you know how they reacted the last time. He let out a throaty chuckle as he remembered Naruto half crawling into his store, one arm and leg crippled by the Hyuga's fearsome taijutsu style. It had taken a few hours for the boy to feel anything in his limbs. Naruto, on the other hand, had an indignant, if slightly sheepish, expression on his face. Nothing was done by me. They were chasing after me. Tuchai just gave him a knowing smile. He honestly believed the boy's antics would get him in a lot of trouble one day. Still, at the end of the day, he and Ayame would be waiting for him with a warm bowl of ramen and a warm smile, nothing less for their best customer, and his surrogate son. Of course, they did Naruto, and there's a solid gold statue of the fourth Hokage in Iwagakure. Naruto looked up at him with wide blue eyes, his face resembling that of a monkey given a truckload of bananas. Really? That's fantastic, Titebeo. Tuchai just sighed. He should have known better than to use sarcasm on someone as innocent as Naruto. You see, Naruto, when Tuchai abruptly cut off, the blonde boy in question blinked in surprise before jumping in surprise as he felt some kind of warm liquid spray across his back. When he looked around, his eyes widened in shock and terror. Tuchai lay motionless on the floor, a single kunai protruding from his blood-soaked throat. The two Uchiha who had been chasing him stood behind him, a cruel glint in the spinning red eyes of the one in front. Orochimaru, what are you up to? The one in the back seemed taken aback by his companion's actions, his gaze shifting between the dead man on the floor and his fellow Uchiha. Takaho, stop, there can't be any witnesses. Do you know what will happen if the Hokage learns about the coup? Unfortunately, Ayame returned to the room at an inconvenient time, holding a tray of tea in one hand. Time seemed to slow down as she took in the scene in front of her, two men standing over Naruto, kunai poised to strike, her father on the floor, blood still streaming from his throat as his empty eyes stared at her. Her scream continued into the night, only to be cut short when three kunai found their way into her stomach. She could only look down at the growing red patch on her normally spotless apron, a puzzled expression on her face as if she couldn't believe what was happening. It only lasted a split second before she collapsed to the ground, first to her knees and then, with a dull thump, onto her side. The small room fell silent once more as Naruto stared in shock and horror at his surrogate sister, who lay motionless and pale on the floor. The Uchiha's arm was still outstretched from throwing the kunai, and his friend was staring at him in disbelief. Then, as if given a silent command, everyone moved. Naruto struggled to his feet as the lead Uchiha lunged forward to grab him. The small blonde simply slipped across the floor to where Ayame had fallen. Ayame-nichan, please. He yanked futilely on her clothes, desperately wanting her to wake up, to turn over and show that she was fine, that she was still alive. Rough hands suddenly grabbed him by the collar, yanking him around to face Sharingan eyes once more. The black Tomo framed by red fields spun slowly at first before speeding up. They were soon a blur, as hypnotic as they were terrifying. Naruto felt extremely drowsy, as if a large portion of his energy had been ripped from his body. He couldn't explain it. It was as if a battery had been removed from him, leaving him cold and tired. Out of his slowly closing eyes, he caught sight of his hands, which were stained red by Ayame's blood, and something new welled up in his chest. Anger, a blind, roaring fury he had never known. Fury at these people for taking those people precious to him. Rage at the world for being so cruel to him. And, most of all, rage at himself for failing to protect the people who meant more to him than his own life. Arghh. Pain welled up behind his eyes, blinding pain, as if someone had set them on fire. He wasn't tired anymore, he had more energy than ever. Everything seemed to come into sharp focus, the colors bursting to life as they had never done before. Then he felt a pressure build up inside him, welling up and begging to be let go. Everything flashed in perfect clarity for a brief moment, time frozen as if captured by a photograph, then nothing. Naruto awoke with a groan. He wasn't sure how long it had been, but he wasn't in his apartment's hospital, so it couldn't have been long. When Naruto looked up, he could see the night sky, and the moon stared back blankly. He jerked his head up, surprised to find himself in what appeared to be a large crater in the ground. He didn't want to be here to explain what happened when Ninja arrived, so he got to his feet quickly. For a brief moment, his vision swam in a way he wasn't used to. Everything seemed more vivid than usual. Colors were brighter and far more visible than they should be this late at night. Furthermore, a strange glow seemed to pervade the area, as if everything was emitting an ethereal light. He clambered out of the crater, confused and disoriented, his hands finding surprising ease on the recently disturbed earth. He finally stopped, falling to his knees after a few moments of aimless wandering down the road. He didn't even notice when he walked right out the gates, the Chunin guards oddly absent from their posts. He just stared at the ground for a moment, the hard paving stones beneath his knees feeling rough and uncomfortable. Not that he cared. Then 2 small drops of liquid pattered onto the ground, staining it a slightly darker shade of brown. He remained there for a while, silently crying to himself as the full force of what had happened hit him. At some point, the skies above him opened and rain began to fall, lightly at first but steadily increasing in intensity. It was as if the heavens themselves were crying with him. The only family he'd ever known, the only people he'd ever known to truly love and care for him, were gone. Murdered right in front of him. Not only that, but he was a murderer. The 2 mangled corpses next to the large crater were unmistakable, the police force symbol emblazoned on ragged strips of cloth. It didn't matter that he had no idea how he did it. All he knew was that he did. He awoke in a nightmarish scene after experiencing a surge of power behind his eyes. He hadn't even seen Iam or Tuchai's bodies and wasn't sure he wanted to after seeing the 2 Uchiha in such a state. Naruto drew himself back onto 2 shaking legs after what seemed like an eternity of kneeling in the rain. He couldn't go back. Not now, not after killing 2 leaf shinobi. He was called naive and even stupid at times, but he understood the penalty for murder. He nearly collapsed to his knees with a choked sob. What would his Jiji think of him now that he was a murderer? What would Iam or Tuchai think? They were the most loving and caring people he had ever met. How would the Hokage feel if he had to sign his death warrant? He shook his head vehemently. He wouldn't let that happen. He'd just go away, far away where he couldn't hurt anyone and no one could hurt him. Naruto took one hesitant step before breaking into a run, his mind made up if still slightly shaken. He had no idea where he was going and didn't care at the time, just that it was away from Konoha, away from what had once been his home. Kairaku was having a strange day, as evidenced by his teacup unexpectedly cracking and staining his robes. Following that, one of the clocks on the walls fell off as he passed, and he discovered a dead bird on his windowsill. Despite being a monk, he had never been particularly superstitious. He had seen far too much in his time with the 12 Guardian Ninja for any of that nonsense. Even so, it was difficult to dismiss all of the strange omens he was receiving. He was now on guard, patrolling the grounds of the Fire Temple. It was a routine task, despised by his fellow monks almost as much as grave duty. Imagine his surprise when he came across a small blonde child lying in the middle of a forest clearing, looking as if he hadn't eaten in days. He was a trained warrior, but he was also a monk, so his first instinct was to rush over and check on the child. When he felt a pulse from the boy's wrist, he let out a small sigh of relief and immediately picked him up. His initial reaction appeared to be correct. The child was severely malnourished and would require immediate attention. He was quickly walking back when the boy started to stir, making soft groaning noises as he subconsciously buried himself deeper into Kairaku's warm body. When the monk looked down, he nearly dropped the boy as he began to open his eyes. After all, it wasn't every day that you looked into the Rinnegan's rippled pattern. I see you're awake, which is good. As he opened his eyes, Naruto's vision was blurry at best, his mind racing from exhaustion and hunger. When he tried to lift his head, he became extremely nauseous, nearly falling off the somewhat Spartan bed he was lying on. Be careful, child, you shouldn't be moving just yet. A wrinkled but strong hand gently guided him back down onto the bed. As a light on a far wall nearly blinded him, the blonde tilted his head slightly, wincing. What exactly is going on? What am I doing? His voice was weak and his throat was dry. As if in response, he found a wooden cup pressed against his parched lips. He gratefully sipped the cool water, sighing in relief as his thirst was temporarily quenched. He tried to open his eyes again, but only managed to catch the silhouette of the man sitting beside him. You have arrived at the Fire Temple, child. While patrolling the grounds, young Kairaku came across you. It is a haven for priests and monks like myself to find peace through meditation. In response, Naruto simply blinked, eventually managing to prop himself up on his elbows and correct his vision. The man in the seat next to him was very old. His face was wrinkled almost to the point where his eyes appeared to be squinting all the time. A small pointed beard jutted from his chin. His hair grayed with a few white streaks. Nonetheless, his face was kind and serene, as one would expect from a monk. The most amazing thing about him, however, was that he seemed to be engulfed in an aura of pure energy. His body aglow with the same ethereal blue light Naruto had seen ever since the incident that led to his self-imposed exile from Konoha. But where that energy had previously appeared unruly and chaotic, it now flowed calmly around the monk like water through a gentle stream. It appears you don't know much about the world if my words perplex you. As he spoke, the man's smile became slightly more mischievous, his eyes squinting in a way that reminded Naruto of his own fox-like appearance. He blinked in surprise as he realized what the man had said, the information taking a few moments for his befuddled mind to process. "Hey, are you calling me a moron?" As the man placed a soothing hand on Naruto's shoulder, he responded with a throaty laugh. The blonde shied away from the contact instinctively, finding it unpleasant for reasons he couldn't pinpoint. It was familiar. "Certainly not, my lad." The old man looked away for a few moments, as if in thought, but even Naruto could tell it was exaggerated. "Let's just say illiterate." He gave another friendly smile before his eyes became more serious. "Please allow me to examine your eyes, child. I need to double-check something." He leaned forward, but Naruto quickly moved his hands away from the man's. The old monk simply returned his hands, holding them in a soothing manner. "What are you going to do with my eyes?" The man chuckled in a dismissive manner, waving his hand dismissively. Nothing, I just want to look at them." Naruto appeared hesitant at first, but eventually leaned forward, opening his eyes so the monk could see them properly. Kairaku was correct back then. He remained in that position for a few moments, staring intently into Naruto's eyes as if they were the portal to enlightenment. What's the deal with my eyes? And how do you see them with your squinting?" The elderly monk simply chuckled, amused by the boy's audacious question. "Don't you have a lot of energy? Tell me, what do you know about your eyes?" To avoid Naruto's question, the man leaned back and gazed evenly at the blonde. Naruto simply looked perplexed as he blinked several times, searching for something reflective. "What happened to my eyes? They're blue and let me see things. What does it mean to you?" The wise monk raised an eyebrow as he reached inside his robe sleeve and pulled out a small hand mirror. "You say blue. Is that what you're seeing?" Naruto approached the small mirror with caution, nearly dropping it in surprise. He stared intently into the reflective glass, moving his gaze one way and then another to make sure what he was seeing was real. "My gaze. What happened to my vision? They all look strange." As Naruto worried about his new appearance, the old monk looked at him calmly. But as he leaned back in, a few more wrinkles appeared on his brow. "Those, my boy, are the Rinnegan, a doujutsu similar to the Sharingan or Byakugan." The elderly voice drew the blonde's attention away from the mirror in his hands, and he looked at the monk, perplexed. "Dajuku, staring him. Bakulan." The monk chuckled to himself, unsure what he was thinking explaining such things to a child. He extended his hand, which the blonde seemed hesitant to accept but eventually accepted. "Walk with me, child, we have a lot to discuss." Naruto looked up at him, his new steely purple eyes wide with childlike innocence, despite the fact that something else was hidden behind them. "My boy, what's your name?" They exited the small room Naruto had been lying in, and the blonde took advantage of the opportunity to look around. The corridor they were now in appeared to be just as sparse and bare as the room he had awoken in. When the old man beside him noticed this, he smiled warmly and gestured to the bare walls and floor. "We have little use for material possessions or gains as temple children. They are detours from the path to enlightenment." When he saw Naruto's confusion, he chuckled, sheepishly rubbing the back of his head in a very unmonk-like manner. "We don't have much." The boy's eyes widened as he nodded his head in agreement. "Yeah, I didn't have much in Ko," he trailed off, frowning down at the floor, the hand that wasn't in the monk's clenching into a fist. "Chukaku." Naruto looked up, startled by the warm voice. The monk was looking down at him, his eyes squinting and a comforting smile across his features. "My name is Chukaku, and I am the head monk of the fire temple in Hai no Kuni. What about you?" Naruto blinked once before coughing and rubbing his chin. "Naruto." Chukaku took a deep breath and looked out a window into the temple grounds, where a group of monks were running through their kata in perfect unison. "Maelstrom is a good strong name. I believe your future will be filled with great things, albeit with some difficulty in getting there." He blinked quickly, seemingly jolted out of his trance-like state, regaining his composure and earlier kindly stance. "But, as is only natural, we must all go through adversity in order to fully appreciate the gift that is life." Naruto just stared at him strangely for a few awkward moments before Chukaku coughed into his hand and resumed his walk down the corridor. "Yes, Naruto, you are more than welcome to stay here. We cannot guarantee you a comfortable life, but if you choose, you will have companionship and peace." The blonde just stared up at him, his eyes wide with wonder. "Would you let me stay here?" Shukaku simply chuckled to himself, not even turning around. Of course, what kind of monk would I be if I refused to feed a hungry child on my doorstep? Come on, let's go get you some food and a place to sleep. I'm sure Sora will be overjoyed to finally be able to talk to someone his own age. Naruto abruptly came to a halt, his hands slipping from his wrinkled grip. He turned around to see Naruto standing there, his head bowed and his messy hair casting a shadow over his eyes. "I am afraid I can't." Shukaku could see tears rolling down the boy's cheeks as he sniffed loudly. "I'm a monster, I don't deserve it." The young blonde, on the other hand, was taken aback when he felt himself being embraced. Shukaku had embraced him and gently patted the boy's back in a comforting manner. "Naruto, don't say that, you're not a monster. I refuse to believe that a child like you could ever be a monster." He stood up, and Naruto was saddened to feel the warmth of the embrace leave him. He quickly found an old wrinkled palm held out in front of him, inviting him to take it. "Please tell me your story now." Naruto paused for a moment before wiping his tears away and taking the outstretched hand. "Okay, Naruto, how much do you know about chakra?" With wide, naive eyes, the small blonde beside the old monk looked up to him. "Chitara." Shukaku simply chuckled as he patted the boy's head, much to the chagrin of the blonde, if his scowl was any indication. Naruto was now dressed in the Fire Temple monk's more traditional robes, the loose linen clothing tied by a white sash. Naruto has a chakra. It is the world's lifeblood, the energy that pervades everything and is produced by every living creature. Through meditation and physical exercises, one can gradually gain control of their chakra, shaping and forming it in ways that allow us to do many wonderful and otherwise impossible things. He returned the kindly smile, only to see Naruto look away disinterestedly. Shukaku bobbed the small blonde on the head with the end of his shakuju, his brow raised. "Hey, what was the point of that?" Shukaku simply smiled innocently as he hid the staff behind his body, despite the fact that it was taller than he was. "What exactly do you mean, Naruto-kun?" Although it is impolite not to pay attention when someone is speaking to you, the young blonde simply scowled at the elderly man, lightly rubbing his head where he had been hit. When it appeared that Shukaku was about to retort angrily, he simply twitched the hand holding his staff, and Naruto backed off. "I'm sorry, but this chakra doesn't sound particularly exciting." Shukaku raised an eyebrow once more as he began to walk towards a nearby wall, his shakuju jingling with each step. "Oh no, you say you're from Konoha, correct?" Naruto didn't respond, but Shukaku noticed his tense posture from the corner of his eye. "There's a ninja village there." When the old monk mentioned shinobi, he knew he had Naruto's full attention. Chakra is what allows ninja to perform their various jutsu and techniques. Naruto became even more alert when the word jutsu was mentioned. Jutsu, fireballs and those cool exploding tags, for example. Shukaku's small smile and curt nod only made Naruto's eyes widen. "Correct. You see, by balancing and combining one's physical and spiritual energies in one's body, one forms chakra, which can then be controlled using hand signs to shape in the way the technique requires." He came to a halt next to one of the temple's imposing walls, which stood taller than most of the buildings it guarded. However, that is not the end of the story. Those who are skilled enough do not even need hand seals and can shape chakra through concentration and focus. Shukaku decided to hammer the point home because Naruto was practically bouncing on his feet at this point. In fact, I believe the surface clinging exercise was one of the first techniques taught to young ninja. With that, the old monk continued walking, first one foot, then another on the wall, until he was high above Naruto, who could only stare up in awe. "I'm using chakra to stick to whatever surface I can find." He walked back down at a leisurely pace, as if he wasn't defying gravity but rather taking a leisurely stroll. "Of course, there are other ways to shape chakra, in fact, you mentioned one." Shukaku lightly chuckled as the blonde's expression became confused. "Those exploding tags work a little differently. Rather than molding chakra inside the body, you apply it to special seals that mold it for you in whatever medium you choose, most commonly ink. This is a type of ninja arts called Fuinjutsu. It has just as many, if not more, applications as its more traditional counterparts." Naruto appeared to have calmed down slightly at this point, simply allowing himself to absorb all of the information he had been given. "So, how does chakra appear?" Shukaku fixed his gaze on Naruto for a few moments before quietly chuckling to himself, irritating the young blonde. "Hey, it's not like the question is stupid or anything." The elderly monk quickly calmed down, fondly patting Naruto's back as he sighed. Of course not. It's an excellent question, but it's probably one I should ask you all things considered. Naruto simply looked up at him and said, in his usual eloquent manner, "Huh?" Shukaku stifled a chuckle as he knelt on creaking knees to look Naruto in the eyes. "You, my boy, have the Daojutsu, those rare eyes that allow humanity to see the unseen." He looked around, eventually settling on a nearby pebble that he picked up. "Can you tell me what you see here?" Naruto just blinked at the small rock, unsure whether or not it was a trick question. "Is it a pebble?" Shukaku simply nodded, his gaze expectant. "Do you only see that?" Naruto simply nodded, his brow furrowed. "Why, you ask? Is it some sort of holy stone or something?" Shukaku laughed as he absent-mindedly tossed the stone over his shoulder. "No way, my boy, it's just a pebble. What do you see when you look at me now?" Again, Naruto seemed perplexed by the question, staring intently at the old monk. "Can I see you?" Shukaku smiled wisely as he rose to his full, if rather unimpressive, height. "However, is that all you see?" Naruto blinked, frowning as he looked at the elderly monk. "Well, you have this strange blue outline, as if you're glowing." Shukaku finally grinned, patting the small boy on the shoulder as he turned to proceed deeper into the temple. "So there you have your answer. What you're seeing, or so I'm assuming, is chakra, specifically my chakra. It was not visible in the pebble because it is not alive and thus cannot produce its own energy like plants or animals." Naruto frowned as he fell into step behind the wise monk. However, the pebble had an outline as well. Shukaku came to a halt, blinking once before returning his gaze to Naruto. "It was kind of green, but it was strange, like I couldn't quite see everything, like a puzzle piece missing the rest of the puzzle." He groaned, one hand reaching up to pull at his hair in frustration. "I'm not sure how to put it, but it's like that." Shukaku simply patted him on the shoulder, a calm expression on his face. "It's okay, Naruto. Some people have spent their entire lives attempting to unravel the mysteries of chakra and its various forms. Few succeed, and even fewer are willing to share their knowledge. In fact, the first and last were the same man whose gaze you share." Naruto looked up, surprised to see someone else with eyes like his. "Who?" Shukaku smiled mysteriously as he pushed open a door into a large room filled with shelves piled high with books and scrolls. The old monk walked over to one of the room's older shelves, some of which had accumulated a lot of cobwebs. He muttered for a moment as he scanned the shelves before selecting a book and blowing away the fine layer of dust that had accumulated. He opened it and flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. This man, the Six-Path Sage. He dropped the book onto the desk, eliciting stern looks from the other monks trying to read as well as a small cloud of dust that caused Naruto to cough. He looked down at the page the book was open to when his eyes finally stopped watering. It was a silhouette of a man standing in front of an enormous beast with 10 tails and a single red eye filled with 9 tomo in concentric circles. A sword was in one hand and a shakuju was in the other, both held up as if to ward off the beast. Because there were no photos from that era, it appeared to be a rubbing of a wood carving. What was his name? Shukaku looked down at the image of the man who was said to be Shinobi's founder, the first man to discover and unravel the mystery of chakra. "By your eyes, I suspect your ancestor, albeit distantly. After all, he was said to have lived over 1,000 years ago." Shukaku flipped the page, revealing another image of a pair of Rinnegan eyes, this time crudely drawn but shockingly similar. Even as his other hand lifted up near his own eyes, Naruto traced the circles radiating out from the pupil with awe in his eyes. How did he come across? Shukaku chuckled lightly. He remembered standing in front of this very book in one of his countless sessions with his own master, the previous head monk, and asking that very same question, so he knew exactly what to say. Unfortunately, very little is known about him. As far as written records go, history does not go back that far. From what we know, he appeared to be some sort of wandering holy man, spreading his chakra and peace teachings. He eventually defeated a great evil, extinguishing it from the world for good. Naruto shuddered as he remembered the massive creature from the first image. He couldn't imagine fighting something like that, and it was only a picture. He was also said to have created the moon. Naruto spun around, puzzledly looking up at the older man, who simply chuckled. "However, I don't put too much faith in that particular legend." With awe in his eyes, Naruto returned to slowly tracing the image of the Rinnegan. He had to be powerful. Shukaku simply nodded at his side, an intense expression on his wizened features as his gaze moved from the book to Naruto himself. "They say his power came from his eyes, which you now have." Shukaku placed a warm and firm hand on Naruto's shoulder as he turned back to him, blinking in confusion. "Even if the circumstances were terrible, you may have been given a powerful gift." Those eyes give you unrivaled potential, and with that potential comes great responsibility. I just hope you remember that one day when you have power." Naruto looked at him with wide eyes for a moment before nodding firmly, fire in his eyes. "Naruto-kun, I see great things in your future. Now come on, there's someone I'd like you to meet." "Why are we out here, Kairaku-senpai?" The small blonde was sitting in the middle of the temple's largest training ground. It was in the back, surrounded by high stone walls with the same seals that protected the temple's main door. It was used by monks who wanted to practice new techniques that they hadn't fully mastered in a safe environment away from the rest of the temple. "We don't want anyone to get hurt when we try this, Naruto, for safety reasons." Naruto just groaned as he rocked back and forth, the large stone slabs that comprised the floor being extremely uncomfortable. "What should I try?" "You're still playing the mysterious senpai." Kairaku finally gave a satisfied nod as he examined 3 seals he had been erecting on the training grounds wall. It was mirrored on all the other walls, chakra suppression seals. The bald monk honestly didn't think such a small boy could be that dangerous, but his master had told him to take extra precautions, so he did. "All right, Naruto, we're all ready to go now. Are you?" Kairaku turned to face his newest student. The two had been introduced properly shortly after Naruto and Chukaku's conversation in the library. Naruto thanked him for saving him, and the two quickly developed a teacher-student relationship. The warrior monk found it refreshing to have a new inquisitive mind to question him. "Are you ready for what, senpai?" The bald monk simply smiled as he walked back over and sat cross-legged in front of Naruto. Following your Kairaku frowned as he considered the best way to tell a child about the incident in Konoha. He winced as he noticed the sudden tension in Naruto's posture, but he persisted. He believed it would be better for Naruto to confront his past rather than try to ignore it. "You stated that you awoke in a crater. Master Chukaku believes this is one of your Rinnegan's natural abilities. We want to figure out what causes this so we can replicate it and eventually control it through training and meditation." Naruto appeared less certain, but nodded hesitantly. "Okay, now I'm going to ask you to remember that night. Remember everything you saw, felt, and saw." Naruto blinked in surprise before looking down, his hair briefly covering his eyes. That was the problem. He couldn't forget. He remembered every detail of that night as if it were forever burned into his memory, as well as everything that happened after it. The feel of Aiam's blood on his hands, the intense fear and self-loathing as he stared up at those spinning red eyes, the coppery tang in the air, and the echoes of Aiam's scream still ringing through the room. Kairaku became alarmed as he felt an enormous amount of chakra build up inside Naruto. It was far more than a boy of his age should have been able to mold. Heck, it was big for a Chunin-level ninja. He backed away from the boy when he noticed tears begin to stream down his face, the pressure building up inside him growing stronger as the chakra was diverted to his eyes in one massive burst. Words that weren't his own suddenly appeared in Naruto's mind. It felt like saying them was the most natural thing in the world, instinctual almost. Shinrateni. Just like that, the room exploded. When the smoke finally began to die down and Naruto stopped coughing, he once again found himself in a large crater, this time slightly shallower thanks to the seals suppressing a great deal of the damage. Even so, the effects of whatever he did were immense. Cracks had appeared in the slabs all around the crater, in some cases snaking out to the walls. Now that he could actually observe the after effects, he could see it wasn't a perfectly circular crater. Most of the damage was in front of him, making it more egg-shaped. He blinked suddenly as he realized something was wrong. Kairaku-senpai. Naruto glanced around, not spotting the bald monk anywhere, at least until the rest of the dust in the room settled. Chirikusempai. The blonde dashed to his feet, rushing over to Kairaku's still form propped up against a wall. His robes were tattered and in places torn, while it looked like he himself had been thrown against a very hard rock, repeatedly. Naruto just stood there in front of him, his eyes wide and watering. He collapsed bonelessly to his knees, his fingers clutching the fabric of the older monk's robes tightly as his body was racked by intense sobs. Suddenly he felt the body beneath him move as Kairaku took in a shuddering breath. The trained mink looked up into the mop of blonde hair, trying to bury itself into his chest before chuckling lightly, only to wince in pain as his chest burned. "Well, the first thing we need to do is work on meditation. Can't have you doing this to every training ground we have ni." The small blonde looked up, tears in his eyes and staining his whiskered cheeks before he wrapped his tiny arms around Kairaku as far as he could. The monk winced at the pressure but just resigned himself to rubbing comforting circles on the boy's back as he looked around the training field. The damage was immense, even with the suppressing seals that he knew for a fact could withstand an ranked fire jutsu without so much as a scorch mark. Yet here this 7-year-old body had managed to put a crater in it about a foot deep with just a simple burst of chakra. At least that was what it had seemed like. It was certainly no wind jutsu. Kairaku had felt his share of those sparring against Asuma. He had never seen anything quite like it before, and that said a lot in his opinion. Such power for one so young. Master Chukaku was right about you, Naruto. You will grow up to be strong. The bald monk smiled at the thought even as another streak of pain flared in his chest. And I'll be there to guide you along the way for as long as I can. Chukaku looked up from his meditation as he heard a knocking on his fusuma. Soon after, Naruto meekly shuffled into the room, his hair hanging over his eyes as he managed to find something incredibly interesting about his feet. Yes, Naruto-kun, what can I do for you? The boy looked up for a moment, catching the older man's gaze for a split second before looking away. In that moment, Chukaku saw fear, regret, a whole multitude of emotions running across those rippled purple eyes. I don't think I can do it. Chukaku stood up at this, walking over to the now trembling boy. Do what, Naruto? He placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder only for the boy to pull away, wrenching himself out of the firm grip. Everything, this training, learning to control this power. He looked up now and it was painfully obvious the boy had been crying. His eyes were reddened and there were still streaks running down his cheeks from the tears he had shed. Please, Master Chukaku, I don't want to hurt people anymore. Chukaku sighed at that, kneeling down on his old knees so he could look at Naruto from his level. Naruto, you wanted to be a shinobi, didn't you? The blonde looked up at that, blinking in confusion despite the new tears already welling up in his eyes. Did you know that as a shinobi you would have been asked to kill people? Chukaku almost flinched as he saw the horrified look on the boy's face. He hated to see such innocence lost, but he knew Naruto would only torment himself further if he didn't do something now. No ninja is without blood on their hands, not even the Hokage. Chukaku shook his head at that, especially not the Hokage. Naruto had stopped shaking now, looking at the elderly monk with a look caught between his sorrow and slight interest. But do you know what separates most shinobi from common thieves and murderers? Naruto blinked once, somehow unable to tear his gaze away from Chukaku's as he slowly shook his head. They know what they fight for, be it for the home they spent so long protecting, or the bonds they made with the people they care about in order to protect them. The elderly monk sighed. Even he had at one point fought and killed. You know, Naruto, after some men experience war and bloodshed, they forever vow never to harm anybody ever again, to shy away from all conflict. His eyes hardened at that as he almost lost himself to a lifetime of nostalgia and regret. Those people are cowards. Naruto's eyes widened at that. His shuddering had stopped and the tears were no longer flowing. Seemingly remembering what he was doing, Chukaku looked back around, a warm expression back on his face. You see, Naruto, peace is not about avoiding fights, it's about choosing them. Naruto blinked in an uncomprehending manner as Chukaku once again grasped him firmly on the shoulder. He didn't shy away from the touch this time. Choosing them. The head monk nodded once, a rather far-off look in his eye before he shook it off. You have a great power at your disposal, and with patience and training you can master it, becoming strong, very strong. But it is what you do with that strength that will define what kind of person you will become. Knowing how and when to use that power is what matters. The quest is finding what exactly you are willing to fight for, and that is a journey every human will embark on at some point in their lives. Chukaku left it at that as the room descended into a calm but not uncomfortable silence. Finally, the small blonde seemed to find some resolution deep inside himself and nodded firmly, spurred on by the kindly monk's words. I think I understand now, thank you, master. Chukaku just gave a small serene smile as he watched the blonde quietly exit his room. A thoughtful expression that had no place on any child's face firmly set into his features. Chukaku sighed as he got back up and walked back to the spot he was in before to resume his meditation. Before he did though, he took one last look at the retreating shadow he could see through the fusama. I hope so, Naruto-kun, for your sake. Damn it, Naruto. Stop moving around so much. The sound of limbs slicing through air and the occasional grunt of exertion echoed through the small training room on the eastern edge of the fire temple as two combatants constantly moved back and forth in a graceful dance of punches and kicks. Maybe you just need to move faster, Sora. The grinning blonde ducked under another high kick before gracefully sliding through his opponent's legs. Before he could remove the other combatant's base though, the other boy jumped up, aiming for a heavy axe kick. At the last moment though, he suddenly found himself falling faster than he expected, throwing him off balance and leading to him falling in a crumpled heap on the ground. That's another point to me, Sora. The dark blue-haired boy looked up with a pained groan at the hand outstretched in front of him before taking it with a few mumbled curses. How many does that make now? 5-2. Sora scowled at the grinning blonde before pushing the hand away in irritation. I would have had you that time if you hadn't used your gravity manipulation. It's cheating. Naruto just chuckled as he patted his friend on the back. All's fair in love and war, as Kairaku-senpai says. Sora just scoffed as a smile finally broke out on his face. Yeah, and what would Kairaku-senpai know about love? At that, both boys burst out laughing, the joyous sound bouncing around the small training area. Oh, at the sound of a third voice, both boys immediately froze before shakily turning their heads to look into the amused expression of the very man they had been talking about. And what does Kairaku-senpai know about love? Outside, two monks were passing by the training ground when they heard two loud gulps followed swiftly by two even louder thumps. The monks simply looked at each other once before sighing and continuing on with the same thought. Naruto and Sora again. Sorry, Kairaku-senpai. Back inside the training ground, Sora and Naruto were rubbing their aching heads while Kairaku was the picture of serene innocence. Despite the shakuju he was subtly resealing into a pouch on his hip. Now boys, final bell is about to ring. We don't want you all sweaty before you go to bed. You know how Chigasu would feel about that. Both boys nodded immediately with slight fear in their eyes. They knew exactly how the old grumpy keeper of the temple would feel about that, and the mere thought had them rubbing various phantom pains. Alright, Kairaku-senpai, but first I gotta show you something. The older monk simply raised an eyebrow at the excited blonde. A year living in the temple really hadn't done all that much to calm his energetic spirit. Would this thing happen to be a certain technique Master Chukaku has forbidden you from using in any of the indoor training grounds? The blonde smiled sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his neck, glaring at Sora as the other boy chuckled behind his hand. He was remembering the other times Naruto had supposedly mastered the more powerful techniques at his disposal. No, come on, Kairaku-senpai, I swear I have it this time. I know what I was doing wrong. The older monk stared at the whiskered child for a few moments as Naruto bravely met his gaze before sighing and gesturing outside. Fine, but not inside. We don't need a repeat of last time. As if to stress his point, he looked across the open field they were entering to a large hole in the wall on the far side. The result of Naruto's latest attempt at his technique. Not gonna happen, just watch me. With an excited cry, Naruto dashed across the fields to face one of the pre-prepared training dummies before adopting a standard fighting stance. Sora dropped to the ground, getting comfy for something he was sure was going to be hilarious, while Kairaku watched more intently. Naruto relaxed himself, concentrating on the pool of energy deep inside himself, drawing it out and directing it through his body. He allowed it to build up inside him but controlled it from becoming too strong. He had learned the consequences of that the hard way. Finally, he pushed the chakra to his eyes and hand at the same time, simultaneously bringing one arm up so his palm faced outwards in one smooth motion. Shinra Tensei. Sora and Kairaku could only watch on amazed as the training dummy was summarily obliterated by the veritable wall of gravitational forces slamming into it. It soared across the field, flying out of sight over the roof of the next building over, raining stuffing and bits of hay down as it went. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only thing that went flying. Whoa! Almost as fast as the training dummy was blasted away, Naruto was sent flying back in the opposite direction. However, he came to a much quicker stop, embedded in a wall a few feet away. Urugh! Like a marionette with its strings cut, he flopped to the ground, leaving a surprisingly accurate imprint of his body in the wooden wall. A few seconds of silence passed before Sora burst out into an uncontrollable fit of laughter. Even Kairaku had to stifle a few chuckles before walking over and helping his student up from the ground. I'm impressed, Naruto. You finally managed to direct the force of the technique, although you might need to work on counteracting that force on yourself. Naruto just nodded limply, his eyes looking slightly distant as he gazed up at the three sets of his senpai looking down at him. Soon after, Sora came over and gave Naruto a shoulder to lean on. But not before he finished his laughing fit. Even so, while he found his friend's misfortune as funny as any good friend would, he had to be impressed by the sheer power behind the attack. He certainly wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of it. Alright, Kairaku-senpai, I'll help Naruto to his room. We were going to have another spar, but I don't think he's in that condition right now. Kairaku just nodded once before turning and retiring to his own quarters, even as the evening bell began to toll around the temple. Sora hefted Naruto up so that his arm was slung around his friend's shoulders and began walking in the direction of the living quarters. You're always doing this, you know. His only response from the blonde was a groan and a small chuckle which made the monk in training smile. You're always trying to do the impossible. Again, he didn't get much of a response from his injured friend. Even so, you'll go ahead and try it over and over again until you get it right, won't you? He looked down and found Naruto grinning weakly up at him, a knowing glint in his squinted eyes. And then you'll try and one-up me. Sora chuckled at that but didn't deny Naruto's statement. What can I say? You're a bad influence on me. And stop doing that. You look like Master Chukaku when you narrow your eyes. Naruto just nodded wearily before allowing his head to droop again. By now they had reached Naruto's room, and with a bit of maneuvering on Sora's part he managed to slide open the fusuma and lie Naruto down on his futon. Get some rest and we'll see tomorrow how the score turns out. He looked around when he got no reply but saw that Naruto was already asleep. Sora just chuckled as he slipped out of the room quietly. His friend was a real idiot sometimes. Sora, this is Naruto. He'll be staying at the temple with us for the foreseeable future and I want you to show him around the temple. Blonde hair peeked out nervously from behind Chukaku's robes, catching the young trainee monk's attention. Ohio, I'm Naruto. The blue-haired youth just stared at the boy for a few moments before tentatively holding out his own hand as they shook. It was an obviously awkward scene, neither child having had good experiences with people their own age, or in Sora's case, no experience period. Good, I know you two will become the best of friends. Now I have some paperwork to do, so run along. With that, the elderly monk turned on a heel and calmly trotted away from the scene. So, what's it like being a monk? Sora just blinked at the whiskered boy before looking away at a wall. You don't really know. I've always lived here so I don't know much else, but it's nice. Naruto nodded at that with a small smile as his posture became less tensed. So what do you do for fun? Sora blinked again, finding this very different to talking with the monks who were always very reserved and self-assured. Well, we have breakfast in the morning followed by meditation and training. Then lunch, then Naruto waved his hands in front of him, cutting the boy off. No, I mean like for fun. In your spare time and stuff. When you're not training or anything. Sora frowned as he looked at Naruto. This was a surreal experience for the boy, that was for sure. While the library is always available for recreational reading. Naruto blinked once before hanging his head down, a metaphorical cloud suddenly appearing over his head. That sounds so boring. Sora suddenly gained a tick mark over his eye as he slammed Naruto over the head with his covered arm, his eye twitching in irritation. The monk's pursuit of enlightenment is not boring. It's a spiritual journey into one's soul, and as such Sora trailed off as he saw Naruto miming along to his words with his hand with a decidedly unimpressed look on his face. Like I said, boring. The blonde flopped to the ground, adopting an incredibly poor attempt at a meditative pose. I mean, what's the big deal with sitting like this anyway? Sora's eye began to twitch again, suddenly regretting getting lumped with this obvious idiot. Suddenly, though, a superior smirk appeared over his face as he too got onto the floor, adopting the correct pose for meditation with his palms facing up, his hands in loose fists, and his knuckles touching. Well, Kairaku-senpai says that it takes the utmost skill and concentration to properly meditate. Obviously, such things are beyond you. At that, Naruto looked up in annoyance, his own tick developing over one eye. Oh yeah, I bet it's not so hard. I could meditate way better than you could. He looked over the position Sora was in and quickly adjusted his own posture to match. If Sora hadn't been so annoyed with the blonde, he might have been impressed at Naruto's first attempt. Instead, he simply raised a haughty eyebrow in mild contempt. Amateur. When he didn't get any response, he looked up to see Naruto's head turned away, his eyes closed in a mockery of meditation. It was obviously an exaggerated way of ignoring Sora. The blonde quickly found a fist buried in his skull and an angry Sora above him. Hey, don't ignore me. From a nearby window, Chukaku watched the whole scene with his mouth hidden by his sleeve. A mild chuckle escaped his lips as he observed the two boys' interaction. He knew it was a good idea to introduce the two, for the other monk's amusement if nothing else. Chukaku looked up from his desk with a fond, nostalgic smile as he thought back on the last year since Naruto had joined the temple. It was quickly marred with a frown, however, as he once again picked up the piece of paper he had been reading. He sighed as he placed it to one side, quickly drafting up the same response he had written every time he received a letter like this. Finishing with a flurry as he signed his name, he sealed it into an envelope ready to give to the passing mailman the next morning. He sighed again as his gaze drifted over to the seal on the envelope the message had come from, the seal of the Hokage. He would change the wording every time, sometimes offering things in return, but the gist was always the same. Bring Naruto back to Konoha. In the same manner, his answer never changed from a firm and resounding no. As long as Naruto was under the roof of the Fire Temple, Chukaku would see he never had to return to his old home. The young blonde had told him about his life there after some coaxing, and the elderly monk was appalled. He had worked out from the boy's treatment and the village's vehement requests for him to be returned just what he was, as well as from his appearance just who he was, although it was speculation until he could find evidence. Even so, he found the village's blatant hatred of a child horrific, especially considering the burden that was already on the poor boy's shoulders. What made it all the better was that he had the power, the authority, and the influence to keep Naruto here, whether the Hokage or anybody else had anything to say about it or not. The fire temple was firmly under his control as head monk, and in turn he reported directly to the fire daimyo, nobody else. He had known the man since he was just a baby in his mother's arms and had always made sure to be in his favor. What's more, the man knew better than to upset the person who controlled his protection detail, the 12 guardian shinobi. Of course, it was always Naruto's decision. If the boy ever actually wanted to return to his old home, Chukaku would not stop him. He would of course be sad to see the boy leave. The temple had been a much brighter place since the boy was introduced. However, he had never seen any indication Naruto wanted to leave. In fact, the boy seemed incredibly happy here, like he had found a smile long since thought forgotten. Chukaku was suddenly broken from his musings as he heard a loud commotion somewhere outside. He moved to the window, a troubled frown creasing his already wrinkled brow as he spotted what looked like a fire on the other side of the temple. However, it was when he saw the first flicker of red and felt a malevolent aura wash over the area that he immediately rushed from the room. Naruto's short-lived sleep was troubled, filled with orange fur and blood-red eyes before he awoke with a start. Cold sweat covered his body, making his robe stick to his skin uncomfortably as he panted. He took a deep breath before raising himself onto his elbows. Glancing over at the clock on his wall, he noted it had only been about half an hour since Sora had brought him to his room. More than that though, there was a presence in the air, weighing down on him like an invisible weight. Getting to his feet, he was shocked to see flames out his window. His eyes widened even as his feet carried him out of his room and towards the fire. He got there to see it was one of the smaller temple buildings. The walls and roof were up in flames. The orange and yellow tendrils of fire were licking at the sky as smoke billowed out from the building in choking sheets. There was a gathering of monks, some attempting to douse the flames with buckets and water ninjutsu while others seemed to crowd around something else. He took a few hesitant steps toward the second group until he felt a familiar hand grip his shoulder. "No, Naruto, you have to stay away, it's dangerous." He looked up to see Chukaku, his normally serene features marred by worry and concern. Suddenly a monk was tossed out of the group like a ragdoll, landing not far from them. It distracted Chukaku long enough for Naruto to break out of his grip and rush forward. He didn't want to be treated like a child. This was his home now and he would protect it with his life if he had to. Ignoring Chukaku's desperate cries, Naruto barged his way past two monks only to freeze in surprise at what he saw. Sora stood at the center of a ring of monks, except it wasn't the Sora Naruto had known for the past year. He was hunched over, a crazed expression in his eyes as an evil grin lifted the corners of his mouth. The arm that he usually kept covered was a mottled red, spiky protrusions jutting out at random, and the fingers had become more like claws. Worst of all, his entire body was enshrouded by a cloak of intense red chakra, bubbling like it was alive. Three tails slowly swayed back and forth behind him. Sora. Naruto's cries only served to draw the boy's attention to him, his now red and slitted eyes locking firmly on the blonde. However, there was no recognition there, only an insane bloodthirsty glee, like a predator spotting its next meal. Naruto took a step back as he saw the pure malice behind the boy's eyes. It wasn't Sora, it just couldn't be. "Naruto, stop." The blonde just barely heard Kairaku's voice along with a few others, no doubt monks concerned with his safety. He ignored them anyway, rushing forward towards the creature his friend had become. He didn't make it within 3 meters of him before a malicious red tail swatted him away from the side, moving faster than he could even follow. He landed a few meters away, his clothing ripped and torn in a few places, and he knew there were a few spots that would bruise the following morning. Even so, he picked himself up on shaking legs, a desperate look in his eye as he looked at his friend. Sora had turned away from him, obviously having lost interest in the prey that put up barely any fight. Naruto's features set into a determined mask as he watched another monk get batted away by those tails. He set his feet into a solid stance, already drawing up the chakra from inside of him and directing it to both his eyes and his hands. Discreetly, he placed his other hand behind him, pointing in the opposite direction as he finally released the pent-up chakra. Danshu Tenon. Naruto immediately felt the pull on his body like gravity had been temporarily inverted, but the hand he had behind him kept him glued in place. Sora, on the other hand, was in no such luck as he suddenly found himself flying through the air towards Naruto, unable to react in time to do anything about it. The blonde had already pulled his hand into a fist, ready to knock some sense into his friend. However, at the last moment it unfurled. The possessed Sora blinked in confusion as he suddenly found himself wrapped up in an iron-like grip. Naruto's hands were firmly wrapped around his friend's back, his chin over one shoulder. The tails behind him waved uncertainly for a moment, as lost as the one guiding them. "Please, Sora, I don't understand what is going on, but please stop this." A solitary tear rolled down Naruto's cheek, evaporating as it touched the cloak of pure chakra covering Sora. Just stop this, let me help you. He hugged tighter, ignoring the pain as the malevolent chakra began to burn his skin and rip away at his already tattered clothing. Stop it. Suddenly Sora seemed to freeze, the tail stopping in mid-sway as if caught in some invisible giant's hand. Ever so slowly the long red tails began to shrink back into the cloak, even as the cloak itself slowly began to leak off of Sora's body. The chakra seemed to twitch in mid-air before slowly being absorbed into Naruto. As it did so, the burns and bruises across Naruto's body began to heal so fast the monks around them could actually see it happening. Finally, when the entire cloak had disappeared and Sora's features had returned to normal, the two boys collapsed to the ground, Naruto still clutching Sora tightly to him. Kairaku and Chukaku immediately rushed over to see if they were okay. Aside from Sora's intense chakra exhaustion and a few burns across his skin, they were perfectly fine. Just unconscious. Chukaku let out a long sigh of relief as he looked down at the two before turning to the assembled monks. He was simply glad there had been no casualties. However, he would still have to explain that to the rest of the monks tomorrow, and he knew that would be exhausting. Not to mention Naruto was going to be asking questions too, and Chukaku was sure he would be hard-pressed to answer them. Alright, start putting out those fires. We'll begin repairing the damages tomorrow. For now, get some rest. As soon as the murmuring dies down and the monks began to disperse, he took another look at the two boys on the ground. How can two boys so young bear such a heavy burden? Drip. Naruto felt strangely at peace. The air was still but not humid or uncomfortable. Drip. The ground beneath him, while hard, was not inherently painful. He had grown used to relatively hard bedding anyway. Drip. There were no aches vary his body like he had expected there to be. Drip. He gently moved a hand up his body, feeling for where he knew he had been burned by that foul chakra. Drip. Strangely, all he felt was his normal smooth skin, not even any bandages. Drip. Likewise, his clothing seemed fresh. There was no noticeable damage. Drip. In fact. Drip. Shut up. Naruto blinked as his voice echoed out through wherever he was. It was certainly not the temple, that was for sure. He got to his feet, once again marveling that he didn't feel at all hurt and his skin was unblemished. He looked around, his steely purple eyes taking in his strange surroundings with a frown. As far as he could tell, it seemed to be the basement level of some kind of industrial building. He had found himself in one once when he was exploring in Konoha, except the one he found himself in was much cleaner. Pipes ran the length of the ceiling, disappearing off into the darkness in both directions of the seemingly endless corridor. There were many of them, but one in particular caught his eye as it was much larger than the rest. It was also the only one that was leaking. Obviously the cause of the irritating dripping. Sure enough, he watched as a single drop of some foul red liquid gathered at the bottom of the pipe into a droplet before falling to the floor. Whatever it was, Naruto knew better than to touch it. When it made contact with the floor, it sizzled for a moment, eating away at the ground. However, more amazingly, the floor seemed to immediately repair itself, the small hole disappearing like it had never been there. He watched this repeat 3 times before tearing his gaze away. It was oddly hypnotic. Having nothing better to do, Naruto began to walk down the corridor. It didn't seem to matter which way he took. They looked exactly the same. Every so often he would reach another leak in the pipe, the only indicator he was actually moving at all. Finally, though, he reached a fork. He blinked, looking down both identical passageways before shrugging and heading right. After maybe another 5 minutes of walking without any indication he was getting anywhere, Naruto finally stopped. He liked to imagine that a year in a temple had somewhat calmed him and given him some semblance of patience. However, the truth was, SHINRATENSEI. The area around Naruto erupted in an explosion of pure gravitational forces, his hands outstretched to either side to evenly distribute the blast. However, when he opened his eyes, he nearly fell to his knees in shock and despair. The walls were completely unharmed. There wasn't even a single indication his technique had done any damage. Not even the pipes seemed affected, they just kept dripping away. However, Naruto did manage to spot one strange thing out of it. Just to test it, he began to build up chakra within his body again, feeling the flow in his pathways as it circulated at a faster rate under his direction. His ear twitched as he looked up at the pipes above him. It was unmistakable. Whatever was flowing through the smaller pipes sped up when he began to gather chakra and likewise slowed down when he harmlessly allowed it to disperse. Weird. With an irritated sigh, Naruto just resigned himself to walking along the pathway. However, no sooner than he put one foot in front of the other, he felt it. That same malicious aura that Sora had been emitting. His eyes widening in panic, Naruto took off at a sprint down the corridor in the direction he felt the presence coming from. If Sora was having another attack, he needed to be there for his friend. After another 5 minutes of running, as Naruto became increasingly worried, he finally turned a corner only to skid to a stop. In front on him was a massive room, a change from the otherwise cramped hallways, but the most noticeable feature was the enormous metal gate spanning the length of one wall, and behind it Naruto couldn't be sure. Darkness stretched on beyond the gate, showing no visible floor or ceiling, making it seem like Naruto was staring out into nothingness. Of course, it didn't stay that way for long. Two enormous eyes cracked open in the darkness as Naruto stepped into the room. Their slitted black pupils framed by red stared through him, piercing him with their gaze. They were followed by an equally large mouth, teeming with teeth as it stretched into a horrific facsimile of a grin. Each gleaming white tooth was taller than Naruto was himself and looked like they could tear through just about anything. So my jailer finally honors me with his presence and with a gift of my own chakra, no less. How very the two massive eyes narrowed slightly as whatever invisible head they were attached to lowered to better look at Naruto, simultaneously pulling in a deep breath of air. Thoughtful, large white claws, much bigger than the teeth, appeared at the base of the cage door, gently stroking the bars with a deafening ring of metal. While a terrifying sight, it did give Naruto the impression that whatever this thing was, he was safe as long as he stayed away from the bars. Are you not going to speak, Ninja? It has been so long since I have had the pleasure of company. 8 miserable years, in fact. Naruto gulped, trying to hide just how frightened he was of this thing. Whatever it was. Demon was the first word that sprung to mind, but upon thinking of that word, Naruto suddenly remembered his life in Konoha. Those quiet whispers when they thought he wasn't listening. They too had called him demon, but Master Chukaku had told him they simply didn't understand him, and it was their ignorance that led to their hatred. Hello, I'm Naruto. The great eyes once again focused on the small child, the head lowering even further so that they were almost at eye level with one another. It wasn't that hard considering Naruto was about as tall as the diameter of the eyes. I know your name, Ninja. I listened to you shout it out every time you made that foolish declaration of becoming Hokage. The creature seemed to spit the word Hokage like it left a sour taste in its mouth. By its voice, Naruto would assume it was male, but it was so loud and booming he couldn't really tell either way. What's yours? Suddenly the creature laughed, a deep, bellowing chuckle that resounded in the small space, at least small in comparison to itself. However, the laugh contained no humor, it was more mocking than anything. Just because you have those eyes, Ninja, do not presume you can hold a candle to their original owner. The creature slammed its remaining invisible paw down somewhere in the darkness beyond the cage, the boom resounding through the room. Its eyes narrowed dangerously as Naruto didn't even flinch, its mouth once again stretching into a sickening grin. Do you not fear me, Ninja? Its voice was low, like a soft grumble despite its sheer volume in Naruto's ears. It also didn't particularly sound like a question. Naruto stood firm though, quickly shaking his head defiantly. Master Chukaku says that fear is the natural human response to something we don't understand. But if we don't choose to try and understand, it will lead to ignorance and unfounded hatred. Then that hatred will only lead to more pain, suffering, and fear. The creature in the cage almost seemed amused by this, its head rising up into the darkness even as its eyes never left Naruto's unmoving form. Don't hope to believe you could ever even try to understand me, Ninja. I am a being beyond your comprehension. The culmination of millennia of hatred and rage. Naruto looked down at that, breaking eye contact with the creature for the first time since meeting it. Master Chukaku told me that nobody is born hating. It is only their experiences, their losses, their sufferings that drive them to hate, and that hatred is only the most extreme expression of love. He looked back up and saw the creature regarding him with what might have been curiosity. It might also have been contempt. Whatever it was gone before Naruto could really see, and the creature was lowering its head back down, its eyes narrowed but firmly fixed on the blonde. After a few moments of tense silence, it finally spoke out in a deep but low tone. For now you may call me Kyuubi. Now begone, Ninja. This idiotic conversation has already bored me. Naruto suddenly felt a tug from behind as if he had been snagged by some invisible rope before he was violently yanked back into darkness. However, before he left he caught a glimpse of the Kyuubi's full form, that of an enormous nine-tailed fox. Naruto, Naruto, Naruto. The voice echoed in his head as if he were underwater. What? The blonde blinked, his eyes open wearily, wincing as he managed to look directly into a ceiling light. His eyes clenched shut as he felt repeatedly smacked over the head. No, wait. What were you thinking, old man? The blonde glared angrily at the wise monk, who only returned an innocent smile, Shakuju returning to its position behind him. Good to see you're awake, Naruto-kun, we were getting worried. Naruto simply stared at Chukaku, rubbing his chin and muttering a few choice curses under his breath. You have a unique way of displaying it, master. The older monk reached around his back for the staff again, his eyes not even opening for a second. Was that you, my boy? The blonde put his hands up in front of him, a strained grin on his face, as he tried to appease the irritated monk. Nothing, sir. Chukaku just kept smiling, but Naruto breathed a sigh of relief when he noticed the staff had vanished into that null space that Chukaku seemed to be able to access at will. Good, because my ears aren't what they used to be. Naruto felt a large drop of sweat gather on his brow before looking around with a more intent expression on his features. Sora, how is he doing? He noticed he was back in his room, the blinds closed for all the good they did in keeping out the early morning rays of light. Don't be concerned, Sora is fine. In fact, he awoke a few hours before you and is probably out training right now. Naruto blinked in surprise. He had no idea what was going on with Sora, but it seemed serious. How long had the two been apart? Chukaku gave a small chuckle as he gestured towards the wall clock, proudly displaying that it was around midday, as if sensing Naruto's thoughts. Don't worry, boy, you were only out for the night, and after a few hours, neither of you had a scratch on you. Again, Naruto blinked in surprise. He wasn't a doctor, but wounds like theirs weren't supposed to heal so quickly. Wait a minute, training. Chukaku simply hummed a yes and bobbed his head once in the affirmative as the blonde drew himself up into a Caesar position. Shouldn't he be sleeping or doing something? The older monk simply smiled as he looked out the window, listening for the usual sounds of birdsong and the rhythmic tapping of the shishiodoshi. He was quite insistent. I believe he had some issues that needed to be worked out, and nothing beats some hearty exercise to clear one's head. Naruto frowned at the word issues, because Sora was supposed to come to him with problems and vice versa. They were supposed to be friends. Speaking of which, Naruto had an epiphany as he reflected on his strange encounter with the Kyuubi. It felt far too real to be a dream, but he wasn't sure what to make of it. Master, Chukaku only raised a brow and cast a single glance in his direction, but Naruto knew that meant he was listening. I had a strange dream while unconscious. There was this strange place full of corridors and pipes that I was wandering through, and then this giant room with a huge cage. Naruto found himself in the center of the head monk's attention when he mentioned a cave. Did you notice what was behind the cage? Naruto blinked in surprise, and Chukaku appeared to be taking what Naruto said seriously. Yeah, at first it was just some big eyes and teeth, but when I left, I saw it. It was a massive orange fox called the Kyuubi. Naruto was taken aback when he noticed Chukaku's eyes wide open in surprise. He had never seen the head monk's eyes open before. You say it referred to itself, as in you had a conversation with it. Naruto nodded nervously as the old monk turned away, looking out the window once more. However, Naruto could tell he wasn't looking this time because his thoughts were elsewhere. But it was all a dream, master. Chukaku gave the boy a quick glance, noting his nervous and insecure expression, which was so unlike Naruto's usually exuberant and confident demeanor. As he slowly rose to his feet on aching knees, the man let out a sigh that belied his age. Naruto, please come to my study in a few minutes. I have something I need to discuss with you. But first, I have to go get Sora because there's something you both need to know. Without further ado, the old monk simply walked away, leaving a befuddled blonde in his wake as he made his way towards the training grounds. Naruto, Sora, I know this is going to be difficult for you to hear, and honestly, I feel it is too soon for me to tell you these things. But I believe that if I don't explain them now, you will be forced to live in confusion later on. Both Naruto and Sora were sitting in Chukaku's study, the temple's only other room besides the library with chairs, which were only marginally more comfortable than the floor. Chukaku sat behind a simple wooden desk designed for function rather than beauty. The elderly man took a deep breath and closed his eyes in thought before looking both boys in the eyes. Do you both remember the Konohagakure attack 8 years ago? He continued after receiving two slightly hesitant nods. It may not have been widely discussed in Konoha, but it was far from hidden. But first, you should understand what the Biju is. He paused for a moment, but the two boys were perplexed by what he said. Nobody knows where they came from or what they truly desire, but we do know they are formidable. There are a total of 9 of them, each distinguished by the number of their tails. He noticed a glint of recognition in Naruto's eyes, but with a wave of his hand, he quickly silenced any questions. They are massive constructs of chakra given form and life, and if I can believe one source of information, intelligence. The Kyuubi no Kitsune, the most powerful of the 9 Biju, was the thing that attacked Konoha 8 years ago. Its motivations were unknown, but it eventually destroyed over half of the village before being defeated at the expense of the Yondaime Hokage's life. Except that chakra is energy, and energy, like all energy, cannot be destroyed, only moved or changed, so it is impossible to truly kill a Biju. At best, it would reform as the consciousness pulled its physical form back together. He waited to see if the boys were following him, and when he saw they were, he continued. That's why, over time, humans began to seal Biju away like a kunai into a scroll. They feared the creature's power, and except for a few with abilities strong enough to control or subdue the Biju, it was the only way. People quickly discovered that something as powerful as a Biju could not be contained in any ordinary object. Even the most powerful sealing items paled in comparison to the most powerful of the 9. Instead, a new method was discovered. The creature's consciousness and power could be contained within a living human vessel, which served as both a host and a prison for the creature's consciousness and power. People quickly discovered ways to weaponize these sacrificial vessels, and the Jinchuriki were born. He sighed sadly as he returned his gaze to the two boys. Does anything make sense now? When he saw Naruto looking down at the desk, his eyes were obscured by his unruly hair. He felt a tug at his heart. Sora, on the other hand, appeared perplexed, looking at his friend with interest as his gaze alternated between the blonde and the elderly monk. I'm confused, why are you telling us this? Surprisingly, it wasn't Chukaku who responded, but Naruto, his head still bowed. Because our name is Jinchuriki. He finally looked up, his brow furrowed in a frown but his eyes sharp and alert. Don't we? He stated this, but the tone of his voice made it clear that it wasn't a question. Chukaku sighed deeply. Naruto was far smarter than he appeared. Not exactly. Naruto, you are a Jinchuriki, and based on your dream, I believe you are the 9-tailed fox that attacked Konoha. The 4th Hokage most likely sealed it into you to stop the creature's rampage. When he saw Naruto's head drop back down, he turned to Sora, who was still looking around confusedly, completely lost. Sora, on the other hand, is a rather unique case. He cannot have a Biju inside of him because they are all currently accounted for in their various villages, but he does have the chakra of one. Even Naruto looked up, perplexed by what the elderly monk meant. I believe someone gathered the chakra emitted by the Kyuubi on the night of its attack and sealed it directly into Sora, transforming him into a pseudo-Jinchuriki. That was the incident, Sora releasing the power that had been sealed within him. Unfortunately, as you saw, a Biju's chakra is extremely powerful and so intertwined with its consciousness that it can retain their will even after separation from the creature itself. The Kyuubi is known as a beast of hatred and rage. It is no surprise that its chakra contains those same dark intents and is undoubtedly drawn upon when the user is in sync with such emotion. Naruto looked up, then around at his friend, who was the one to dip his head this time. It's a great power, but it's also a huge burden. However, as with any skill or technique, with sufficient patience and practice, I do not wish it. Chukaku and Naruto turned to face Sora, who had stood up from his seat, causing the wooden chair to clatter to the ground. His heart was pounding and his eyes were welling up with tears. Chukaku thought he saw a flash of red enter his eyes for a split second. I never asked for this kind of power. Take it from me. His shoulders slumped as he felt all of his anger drain from him. He turned around to see Naruto gently holding his sleeve. He didn't know why, but it felt like that single touch was all that was keeping him from storming out of the room. Unfortunately, Sora, there has never been a safe way to extract Biju chakra once it has been sealed into a host. He paused for a moment, only half noticing Sora's angry, yet dejected expression. On the other hand, as I previously stated, you are a one-of-a-kind case, perhaps if I'll get it done. Chukaku sighed, wondering when it became so common for people to cut him off in the middle of a sentence. As he looked over at the young blonde, he wore a determined expression on his features. I'll find a way to assist you, even if it means taking on your burden myself. Sora was taken aback. He knew Naruto was his friend, but he had not expected such a passionate reaction. As he drew Naruto into a grateful embrace, a small grateful smile appeared on his face. Thank you, Naruto, I can always rely on you, can't I? Naruto simply nodded, his eyes unwavering in their resolve. When they heard a loud and deliberate coughing, the two finally parted ways. They turned sheepishly to look at the head monk, who had his arms crossed and one eyebrow raised. Just as I was saying. He slightly tilted his head, waiting for an interruption. When none came, he smiled serenely before continuing. Perhaps there is still a way. He turned to face Naruto with an intense expression that made the small boy nervous. Naruto, while Sora was under the influence of the fox's chakra, you did something that none of the monks had ever seen before. You almost seemed to be drawing the chakra right off of him and into yourself, and you even healed as you did it. Naruto only blinked in surprise before raising his head and rubbing the back of his neck. I did. That's something I don't recall. All I remember is gripping Sora and wishing he'd just stop. I didn't want to see him like that, covered in that foul chakra. Chukaku's other brow joined his first for a brief moment before adopting a similarly thoughtful expression. I'd like you to do something for me, Naruto. The blonde simply nodded. He had long since stopped questioning the head monk's orders, even if he never phrased them that way. Touch my arm and remember that moment, like when you first started practicing gravity manipulation. Naruto appeared perplexed and unsure, but he grabbed the old man's arm and began to reflect. He could easily recall the previous night's events, as he had done for the past year. He began to feel a strange pull from the contact with Chukaku as the sight of red chakra and the acrid smell of smoke, along with desperation and sadness, filled his recollection. Similarly, the elderly monk looked at his arm in awe. He could clearly feel his chakra being siphoned off into Naruto at a rapid pace. He might have been concerned if he didn't have as much chakra as he did, only rivaled by Kairaku and unknowingly Naruto in the temple. That same instinctual feeling filled Naruto up a year ago when he suddenly found words that weren't his own leaving his lips. What a beautiful path. Chukaku's eyes widened in amazement as he felt the rate at which his chakra was drawn and significantly increase. He quickly yanked his arm free from Naruto's grasp, and thankfully the process came to a halt. But he felt quite tired, as if he had spent a few hours training. Naruto, on the other hand, appeared incredibly refreshed, with the slight bags under his eyes from fitful sleep disappearing. Sora had looked around with a puzzled expression before mumbling something about blondes having all the luck. That was intriguing. Naruto looked up at the old monk, as if expecting an explanation for what had just happened. Chukaku nodded, seemingly to himself, after a brief moment of thought, before returning his gaze to the ground. Tread a path. Naruto, was that what you said about the names of those gravity techniques? Chukaku hummed again after a quick nod. Perhaps this is one of the 6 paths that gave the sage his name, and those gravity techniques could be another. Naruto almost reflexively found another set of phantom words pass through his mind. The Diva Path. Chukaku and Sora blinked at Naruto as the blonde shrugged. I believe it is the Diva Path. Chukaku blinked once more before rising and walking over to the window. Interesting. That means you have 4 more to discover. He turned around, and Naruto was reminded of the times he had spoken with his Jiji, as the two had the same expression. Only time will tell whether you discover them or not, but I'm confident that if you do, you will master them. He sighed, wishing he had a pipe to draw from, but he had given up smoking years ago to support the temple's clean body ideal. For the time being, I believe that is sufficient. Too much information in one sitting can be as harmful as anything in excess. Get some food, we have plenty of time to figure things out. He watched as the 2 boys stood, bowed, and exited the room, bickering almost as soon as their feet touched the ground outside his door. You've held me, huh? Sora smirked mischievously as Naruto froze, his face flushed with embarrassment. Duh, you're just jealous that I had to save you. Sora maintained his haughty demeanor even as he began to laugh, his hand on Naruto's shoulder as the two walked away from the study. Chukaku smiled as they walked away, glad that their spirits and friendship had not been dampened by their ordeal. It was unusual to see such a strong bond, especially one that could withstand such adversity. The next few months flew by for Naruto. He had made a promise that he intended to keep. He'd thrown himself wholeheartedly into finding a way to relieve Sora of the burden inside of him. He now spent hours a day in the library, poring over books, but that didn't mean he ignored his training or other studies. He still found time to do everything, despite the fact that his days were becoming increasingly crowded. The other monks weren't surprised. He had once meditated for 3 days straight to prove a point. Fuinjutsu had caught his attention briefly. It was what had sealed the chakra into him and Sora in the first place. But that had led nowhere. Learning and mastering sealing at that level required years of intense study, which Naruto felt Sora lacked. It wasn't obvious, but there were hints that Sora was becoming increasingly affected by Kyuubi's chakra. Brief bursts of unreasonable rage, his eyes occasionally turning red, and, worst of all, his arm. Sora's arm had always been a source of concern for him, but it was now permanently stuck in its demonic form. What Naruto needed was time, or at the very least a way to shorten the time it would take him to learn Fuinjutsu, which he had previously thought was impossible. When he brought the matter to Kairaku, however, he immediately thought of a solution, a technique known only to Konoha ninja but shared with the Fire Temple due to their affiliation, the Shadow Clone Technique. It seemed perfect at first. Now Naruto could divide his attention as much as he wanted and only have to deal with a minor headache at the end of the day. In theory, he should be able to create hundreds of clones who can all share their memories with him using his chakra reserve. Of course, things were never that simple for the blonde. The moment he attempted to create any clones, he ran into a problem, if you can call it that. Because the clones had Rinnegan eyes as well, Naruto shared his vision with them and they with him. It had been a surreal experience for the blonde to find himself staring in 100 different directions all at once, not to mention intensely confusing and painful. He could only deal with his vision being split 3 ways for the time being, but it was still very distracting. Chukaku reasoned that with practice, he could increase the number of clones he could handle, so he would spend about an hour each day just acclimating to it. He discovered by chance as a clone watched him spar with Sora that it gave him a distinct advantage and that a single clone could cover his blind spots while 3 could practically eliminate them entirely with nothing more than sitting still and watching. Of course, they were fragile, and once Sora realized what he was doing, he set about destroying them as soon as possible. Fortunately, with Naruto's incredible reserves, it was relatively simple to simply remake them once popped. Sora had learned the shadow clone technique as well, and thanks to his own demonic chakra, which provided him with substantial reserves, if not comparable to Naruto's or any other Jinchuriki, he quickly put them to good use. He did not have the same problems as Naruto, but the mental exhaustion was much more taxing on him, limiting how many clones he could make in a day. Nonetheless, it enabled him to study with clones inside while meditating or training outside, freeing up some of his day. However, with Naruto's day pretty much taken up, Sora found himself with a lot of free time. Of course, every problem has a solution, and while looking after Naruto in the library, he became intrigued by a book on sealing and began studying the art. He made liberal use of shadow clones in the process, but he soon had the other monks impressed by drawing out various simple barrier and strengthening seals. Naruto, on the other hand, was considering different options, namely his Daojutsu. He'd thrown himself into attempting to comprehend his enigmatic eyes, relentlessly training his Diva and Preta paths. Surprisingly, he discovered that the Preta path was more than just the ability to absorb chakra, as he had first assumed. He could then either pull it into his own body or push his own into someone else's, instantly adapting the chakra to its new home. He discovered that he could push chakra into the ground or inanimate objects, but it did little more than strengthen them and, if pushed hard enough, give them a blue glow. In addition, he had spent time researching the sage himself, hoping to gain insight into his powers and possibly hints on potential abilities. Apart from the more bizarre myths, such as the moon myth, there was little information on the man himself, as with all information from that time period. Naruto couldn't even remember when or where the man had lived. The only useful information was that he possessed a number of special items that were now revered in many places. When he brought that information to Chukaku, the man smiled but said nothing, instead leading Naruto deep underground the temple via passageways the young blonde had no idea existed. They had finally arrived at a large vault containing some of the more valuable or sacred items held by the Fire Temple. There were even treasures from the Fire Daimyo's personal collection that the man wanted to keep safe but didn't want to use ninja to protect. The surprise came when Chukaku showed him an old shakuju, which appeared to be ordinary enough but was said to have belonged to the sage himself. According to very ancient records, it was given to one of the man's closest friends, who went on to found the Fire Temple and become the first head monk. It was kept in the vault because just holding it consumed massive amounts of chakra, killing an ordinary person in moments and an average jounin in about 10 minutes. Naruto had gone to get it, but Chukaku had stopped him, telling him it wasn't the right time. So Naruto was sitting in a field behind the living quarters, one of his favorite places to meditate because it had a small pond with a single stone in the center he could rest on. He was feeling for his chakra, observing its flow as it moved and slid through his pathways, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Kairaku had told him that he had incredible control over his chakra, especially for someone with reserves as large as his own. Chukaku hypothesized that it was related to his Rinnegan once more. He had compared the chakra to a lumpy fluid, and the Rinnegan to a strainer. Uncontrolled chakra moved through the pathways, sticking to the sides and causing friction, unbalancing the entire system. It would be strained as it passed through his eyes, becoming more fluid and less viscous. The only way the head monk could explain it was that it would cause less friction and give Naruto unparalleled control. When a small frown creased his brow for a moment, he felt his chakra move around his stomach, close to his gate of view. In that area, there was a small, almost imperceptible pull on his chakra, draining it out of his pathways and into something else. Of course, he knew what it was, the seal that held the Kyuubi within him. He considered how simple it would be to simply pull back on that chakra, preventing it from flowing into the seal. All it would take was a single thought. Of course, that would quickly degrade the prison, releasing the Kyuubi's chakra within him in a way he was certain would not be a pleasant experience for him. He chose to concentrate on that, feeling the way his chakra was being leached out, focusing intently on the seal, and the way his chakra moved through it. He could also feel the Kyuubi's chakra leaking into his own system, almost instantly being converted into a more usable form by both the seal and his Preta path, which he realized had been working subconsciously since the Rinnegan had activated. he suddenly felt a familiar tug on his mind, one he hadn't felt in months. He gave in, allowing his own consciousness to sink deep within himself. So you've come back. When Naruto opened his eyes, he was back in the enormous room that represented the seal, with the enormous bars in front of him and the Biju beyond it. Kyuubi. Naruto cocked his head slightly before feeling a large gust of warm air blow over him as the great fox snorted contemptuously. There's no need for niceties. Ninjin, why have you come here, or do you enjoy flaunting your freedom in front of your prisoner? Naruto frowned as he sat on the floor, pulling his legs towards him in a loose cross-legged position. In the darkness of his cell, he couldn't quite see it. But the Kyuubi frowned. It was a position he had seen many times before and one he would never see again. I never asked to have you sealed inside of me. He felt the warm breath of the Kyuubi wash over him once more as the large fox snorted, this time amusedly. So you've come to complain about the injustice of your pitiful existence. How typical of your species. Naruto didn't flinch. He had thought long and hard about the situation with his tenant, and no longer feared the Kyuubi, at least as long as it was safely locked away within him. You speak as if you are familiar with humans. He saw a solitary red eye crack open in the darkness of the cell, the slit pupil swiveling until it settled on his form. I know far more about your kind than I care to remember or even wish to. There was long silence between the two, and when it became clear that neither intended to speak, the great fox grunted in annoyance, its eye closing again. Can you tell me what happened? The silence was almost palpable this time. The Kyuubi didn't move, but Naruto had the distinct impression that it was entirely focused on him. What happened to make you so angry? A loud grunt echoed through the large cage, the bars slightly trembling as the mighty fox raised itself onto its paws. It lumbered over to the cage entrance slowly, each step reverberating around the space and causing the ground to tremble. Naruto finally got a good look at the creature. Its orange fur glistened in the new light, with black markings reaching up from around its eyes to its ears that looked more like a rabbit than a fox. 9 long tails swayed slowly behind its massive body, each one looking like it could take off the top of a mountain with a single absent flick. It had an odd humanoid torso with hands and arms instead of front paws. Aside from that, it looked exactly like its name suggested, a large fox with 9 tails. Ninjin, time has passed. Time produces more hatred in a being than any number of pitiful grudges or grievances, and I am cursed with the gift of immortality. It sunk onto its belly once more, its large red eyes narrowing, the long tails wrapping almost protectively around its body. Why do you bother Ninjin with such frivolous questions? What are you hoping to gain from it? A method of controlling me? Are you tired of waiting for this cursed seal to finish sucking my chakra into you? Its gaze was fixed on the blonde, piercing him as it awaited the response it had already anticipated. I'd like to comprehend you. It blinked once, which would have been amusing if the situation had been different. That was not the response it had expected, and its eyes quickly narrowed again. You will fail, so leave now. Naruto felt the tug on his mind again. But this time he was ready. He resisted the pull and remained exactly where he was. The Kyuubi had gotten up to return to its hiding place in the darkness, but when he realized he wasn't alone, he turned around. Ninjin, why do you test my patience? Allow me to rest. However, Naruto did not move or blink. In fact, his eyes had been closed since the fox began speaking. Is that what you're looking for? Peace. The Biju came to a halt, its tails coming to rest behind it as the head turned. Red eyes scanned Naruto's motionless form, unnerved by the similarities it saw between the two. Why then attack Konoha? Why harm people who are so insignificant to you? What were you hoping to gain? Surprisingly, Naruto heard growling within the cage, and when he opened his eyes, he saw the Kyuubi's face uncomfortably close to the cage's bars, its lips bared to show its massive teeth. Ninjin, don't try me. I have no reason to explain myself to you or any of your wretched kind. Continue to irritate me, and I'll make sure that when I claw my way out of this cursed seal, it's the most agonizing moment in your brief, pitiful life. It ended with a dismissive flick of its tails as it raised its head high above Naruto, the boy nearly losing the Biju in the darkness of the cell. I said leave now. Naruto felt the tug again, but this time it was much stronger. He was unable to resist and was ejected from the seal. When the fox was finally satisfied that it was no longer alone, it retreated back into the cage, far into the darkness where it couldn't even see itself, and the entrance was a mere pinprick of light. It curled up around itself, its 9 tails wrapping around its form as it slept, its brow furrowed.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.